Hello, Year Fives. I've got to change of location. I've decided that I'm going to experiment a bit with being able to move around. I like moving around the classroom when I'm in. That's when the whiteboard's working, as Teddington know. But I really do enjoy demonstrating. So that's what I'm going to try and do. I hope it works. You will have to forgive and be a bit patient with me because I'm going to be leaning into the screen a bit more because I've had to set up my laptop in a very weird way. Anyway, I've got my trusty easel out. I've had it for over 20 years, but it hasn't come out of the bag for the past 10 years because I've been so busy doing things for school. Anyway, I'm hoping that as I have quite a long day at the moment, so I'm marking well into the evenings, because obviously some of you can't post your work until later on. So what I'm doing is I'm marking later as well. And Mrs. Blanche said, well, if you're having a longer working day, make the most of your time in the middle of the day and do something nice for yourself while it's light. Well, I'm hoping I'm going to be using my easel and doing a bit of painting myself. It'd be really good for me, actually, because then I'll update my skills and think about the way you work as well. Right, so anyway, let's press on. So today we are looking at making preparatory sketches based on photographs. Can you turn to the person next to you and say what you think preparatory means? Okay, can you tell me now what you think it means? Now you're going to have to shout it a little bit because I'm not going to hear it unless you shout, okay? Yeah, I think I heard a couple of you say that it's getting ready. You're doing sketches to get ready for something. In this case, it's going to be a final piece of work. Having said that, what I want you to do is get used to doing a preparatory sketch today. You may or may not use the ones you used today, that you've created today. It might be that you decide to do a different one. That's up to you. Anyway, steps to success. So you're going to look closely at and observe key features of a photograph. You're going to identify the distribution and use of colour, and you're going to interpret through sketches the key features of a photograph. So that's what we're going to do. It'll all make sense as we go along, honestly. So here we are. This is the first image that we're going to look at. And what I'm going to do here is I am going to look at how the colour is distributed here. So first of all, I'm going to look at the foliage down here. These plants are moisture-loving plants. And what I like about these ones is they're kind of almost cloud-like in form. What do I mean by form? Yeah, the shape of it. It's the artistic language that we would use. So the form of these plants, and I'm just going around the outlines of some of these shapes. Obviously, I haven't got time to do all of them, otherwise it'd be pretty boring for you. I'm just going to look. Can you see what I mean about them being almost cloud-like? It's just sort of light and fluffy and lots of random shapes. Some of them will overlap, some won't. Oh, that one's not so good, so I'm going to take that one back and do that one again. It's a bit smoother towards the waterline than I showed it. Here's an overlapping bit. So that's what I'm looking at. So we've got a lot of light green there, haven't we? Some of it really, really light in places where the light is shining through and catching it. And then I'm going to go for a darker green this time, because the shrubs around here are a lot darker. Can you see how they're also more angular in their profile? I'm just going to pick out a few bits here. There are also some ferns in the undergrowth, which, although it's hard to distinguish in this picture, they are there. There's also a bit of a line there as well, isn't there? Where the colours just change slightly. So it's darker under there, more shadow. Right, so that's a darker green. But then we've also got tree trunks. So we're going to go for a brown. And we've got a tree trunk there. Much straighter lines, aren't they? Not perfectly straight, but straighter. And also notice, can you hear that through the foliage here, we have intermittent glimpses of branches and twigs. So that's worth noting as well. Not a lot of detail, but just hints of it. And then, if we can find a grey, I'm going to go for that mid-grey. And we've got a rock there. And here, this is almost like slate in more horizontal lines. And here again, okay. And that's quite smooth, quite a smooth finish. And I shall also do this path in grey. But the difference with this path, notice how none of these lines are straight. Quite often I find with children's paintings and drawings, if you say paint a river, for example, it's straight, it's dead straight. But no, look at this meandering. So I'm going to do this in blue, even though I know it's not a particularly bright blue, but just so that I can distinguish this from the other shapes, I'm going to do it in blue. Right. I'm ignoring the ducks. They're not a key feature of this particular image. But look at that. It's wider in parts, it gets very narrow in parts. There's a hint of the water there. But it's definitely not a straight line. It's quite often softened by the foliage, these plants here. And the other thing is, can you notice these plants in the foreground? So we're going to go for another green. We'll go for this mid-green, and they're quite spiky. Now they're quite spiky, and they don't always just go upright. And there's some crossover of the leaves, so we can do that. Right, so I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time, but I just want you to notice the way colours overlap sometimes. And there are different textures. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to put some of these textures in here, just that I know that they're different textures. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I just want it to be pointed out that there are different textures in amongst these colours. I'll change that so that we also know that we're using different colours in here. So some of it is darker. That blends in quite well, which shows that it's quite a good colour match, doesn't it? So we've got lots of darker bits there. Texture's important. And I'm also going to do a very light colour in there, because there are some very light areas. That's not quite that light. You would be able to make a lighter colour without it being too noticeable, but look here as well. Now there, it's almost like little circles, and some little circly bits. You could even change it to a dot. And let's try a highlighter and just dot it. Works quite well, doesn't it? Okay, go back to my pen. And also don't forget, yeah, that path is very textured. And I've just put a few, just so I can see that there is texture there. Right. That gives us a rough idea of the sort of thing we're looking at. This isn't what I would expect you to do. I will demonstrate what I expect you to do later. But this is just pointing out how there are blocks of colour. Look at the form of the different types of plant or features in that picture. And I think it's even more vivid if we go on to this next one. Now I'm going to start with a nice dark green here, because I am going to follow the outline, of that top tree line, okay? So it really isn't easy using the mouse to do this, but you certainly get the idea. There's nothing straight about that, is there? It's definitely wonky. And even if we have a look at the water line, where the trees overhang and the river widens in places, even that lower profile of the trees, not straight at all, deliberately so. We've got a couple of buildings there. What I really like actually on this one is I'll just do that building in there really quickly. So we have got a bit of a estate silhouette of these buildings here on the horizon. And the other thing that is really worth noting is if we have a look at the colours in the sky. Now here you've got pink. Now these blend one into another. This is a lovely sunset. They do blend into each other, but you can also block those colours as well. And then we go up into the sky, which is a lovely purpley colour. Let's have a look, see if we can get something a bit like that, isn't it? Sort of, yeah, sort of a mauvey. Oops, here we go. And that goes up like that. But they do merge. And the clouds, that's a very light grey, isn't it? But there's still that sort of purpley, bluey haze to it. The clouds nice and fluffy. Okay. And what we also need to notice is the way those colours are reflected down here. in the water. And they come quite high up, don't they? So again, we're looking at blocks of colour. And look at the way the light is hitting there. The other thing that I want to point out is the lightning. And that is reflected here. Here. I think it's kind of broken there. So there, that reflection is important in that particular image. It is a key feature. That horizon there is a little lower than halfway down the picture. So it's good to see the proportions here. And also, have you noticed how these lines, the tree lines, both lower and upper tree line, taper off towards the horizon? And that means it leads our eyes down into that focal point. It's not central, just off center. That's important in the way that we are creating this picture. The aesthetics, the way it looks, is really important. Okay. Now, these are some of the images that you might like to use. And let's just have a look at the energy of the water in each of these. I mean, this one, if we think about Beaver's pavement art and how he had the rapids, loads of energy going into that, tumbling down across the rocks, huge force, loads of energy in that water. And this crosses really nicely from our topic on rivers and flooding at the moment. So here we've got, again, there's quite a lot of power in that stream, but not as much as over those rapids. And then we go to this nice babbling brook. It's just gently going along, just bubbling along. And then this last image here, you've got a wide expanse of water. And because it's so wide, the energy is dispersed out. And therefore, the surface of the water is pretty calm. It's almost glass-like. So different types of energy in each of those images. And again, with this one, can you see the stillness of that water compared with this one, where can you see all the spray coming up as it's hitting the rocks? Quite a lot of energy in there, isn't there? But not as much energy is being used here in this waterfall. Can I just say that that image of the waterfall I have seen turned into a really beautiful piece of finished work. And it was by a boy a few years ago who didn't really like art. And he decided he was going to be very bold in his approach to the artwork. And it turned out beautifully, really good. He experimented with the style and it just worked. You might find the same. And then here, where we've got those birds skimming across that water. Lovely. Right, so you need to choose 2 or 3 of those images to create some sketches, and then one of those, or indeed another one if you decide you're not happy with any of the ones you do this time, you're going to build upon to create your final painting. But it might not be painting, I'll come to that in a minute. To do the sketches, you can use pastels or colour pencils if you wish. Pay really particular attention to the water and how you can convey its energy levels. Right, before we do that, I am going to just demonstrate how I would do a sketch. I'm going to do a sketch of this particular image. Bear with me with this. It might not be entirely accurate because I am going to have to go off that image so that you can see me working. So I'm going to stop sharing this just for the moment. And I'm going to start it off. I'm using the soft pastels, the more chalky ones. If you've got chalk at home, fine. You don't have to use pastels. You could use pencil crayons. I don't even mind if you use, this is coming from me, this is unusual. I don't even mind if you use felt pens. You need to use what you've got available. I don't even mind if you decide I can't do colour because I haven't got any colouring pencils or felt pens. Use pencils, that's fine. But it would be worth noting, if you're not using colours, write what colour it is, like light green, dark green, or whatever in there. So remember, I had cloudy effects, didn't I? A cloud effect on the plants. So I've got my soft pastels and I'm using it lengthways on and just creating clouds. And we have softer edges, so I don't want any straight edges. There's a little bit of a lump there, and over the other side of the river as well. Okay. And then I want a darker green for the shrubs. And there was, I believe, a bit of room for a path there. And along there was some trees and things. So I'm just going to put a little bit of an edge along there. Oh, if I remember rightly, actually, that tapered off quite significantly up there. So I'm going to just do that. I'm going to use a brown now because I knew there were some trees up here somewhere. And also, can you remember, there were some bits of branches and twigs that showed through there. Okay, now, do you know what, I'm going to use a different brown there. Make it a bit more brown. Because I want to use this more of a grey colour. Now, I've done that, but I want to show that there's a different texture. So I'm going to smear that, because that is where the stone is, and there is some along there too. Okay. I'm also going to use that for this colour. But this path was more textured, wasn't it? You remember? Much more texture. I've just realised I had my back to you too much then, sorry. But hopefully you can see how that's coming on. And then in this foreground, you also remember there was some, what I think were probably snowdrops. They were very spiky, weren't they? Kind of crossed. Okay. Not spending too much time on it. What I might do is, I've got green in my hand. I'll put a texture here. I want to show that there was texture there. Different textures in different places. Right, so it's definitely more textural. And then the river. Remember, it's wider in some places than others. And again, I'm just smudging that because it has a much smoother appearance. Okay. I'm not going to do too much else. I think I quite like to put a few highlighty bits, make that a little bit more cloud-like in places. And show that there were lighter areas as well. Along here, it was quite light, wasn't it? And here, yeah, some slightly lighter areas. Again, different texture though. Really important to get that texture in. And that path, let's show that there's texture in there. Sure, I have a black. Yeah. So we can see that there's texture. That's all you need to do. That's a sketch. It shows us where the blocks of colour are. And I haven't taken long doing it. So I would have plenty of time to do another one, wouldn't I? So that's this one. I should just bring it closer to the screen for you. So there it is, showing blocks of colour and texture. Those are important features in that. When I'm also here, I'm just going to show you two other things that I did, two other sketches. Now this one, I know it's difficult to see because that's using pencil crayon, but if you have a look on this side, I have included more detail regarding the texture. And I've only done it in that area, just to remind myself. Along here, it's very difficult for you to see, I'm sure, but I have just done background colours just to give myself an idea. And then I did this because I want to show you what you could do if you haven't got paints or pencil crayons at home or pastels. Save bits and pieces to use in your final piece, and you could do it as a collage. So, for example, here, this is all yogurt lids. This is cut up bit of junk mail. These are leaves. I had some clementines with leaves on. You could collect leaves, or you could, if you have similar clementines to me, I'll save those drier leaves. I happen to have green paper around, which was a lucky thing. These, again, bits from yogurt lids, which were brown. But you can use junk mail. You could use old Christmas cards, cereal packets. Just find bits of colour that you think would be useful. So if you prefer for your final piece to be collage, provided I can see that you've thought about blocks of colour, I'll be happy. Right, let me sit back down so that I can see you again better without having my back to you. My apologies if you did get a lot of my back while I was doing the sketching. It's rather trickier, and I'm sure I will master the art as I go along. But I hope that was better, that I was up and moving for you. Your turn. Do your best. If you haven't got too many resources at home, then look, and if you can find a picture in a magazine or something, or use the computer, get an image up and outline the blocks of colour and indicate where there's different textures. You can do that. I know it's not easy at the moment, grabbing resources around, so good luck to you and thank you very much.